Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Hi, I'm Kelly from Qualio and your host here at From Lab to Launch. Thanks for joining the show today. We've published over 50 interviews with innovators in life sciences across the world. It's been so inspiring to hear the stories of perseverance and innovation to improve human health and save lives. If you're enjoying these conversations, please consider subscribing and giving us a review on Apple or Spotify. If you want to be on From Lab to Launch, please see the application linked below in the show notes. Today, we're chatting with Jeff Barrett, President and CEO of J-Pac Medical. Jeff has more than 25 years of experience building high-growth medical product-based companies. He leads the advancement of J-Pac's growth strategy, pursuing opportunities to further drive adoption of the company's offerings and optimizing capabilities to better serve the customers. Prior to joining J-Pac Medical, Jeff held CEO positions at GI Supply, Optum LLC, and Vice President of Operations in roles at Haemonetics and Aspect Medical Systems. He's also a very successful entrepreneur, and by applying his operational and engineering aptitude, he founded EggRock Modular Solutions, which became a disruptive business in the building technology industry. Jeff has proven expertise building and managing high-performance management teams, developing and implementing optimized operating infrastructure and manufacturing processes, and both improving existing product pipelines as well as growing new ones. We're really excited to have Jeff here today. Thanks for joining us. Let's talk a little bit about your background, Jeff.
Sure. Well, thanks, Kelly, for having me. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully I can offer some insight that's helpful to some of your audience at least. But my background is interesting. I started my education. I went to Rutgers University, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I ended up double majoring. I went through a 5-year program there and did engineering and economics. So talk about two extremes. And from there, I started my career at a division of Lockheed called CalComp. It stood for California Computer Company at the time. So that was commercial electronics, basically CAD systems for IBM when they made those. So I started out there. I got very involved in what's today called lean manufacturing. And I wrote an article for kind of a trade rag and ended up getting called by a company called Haemonetics. And was my transition to medical. So went through, that was a real high growth situation and an IPO. So that's where I got my entrepreneurial bug. And then from there, I worked at several, startup type companies, Aspect Medical, which we sold to Covidian, and some smaller companies that you mentioned in your introduction, as well as my own company. So I've been at J-Pac Medical for 7 years now. So it's been a kind of started as a turnaround situation and now has expanded into growth. So it's been very interesting.
That's nice. And J-Pac serves primarily medical device industry?
Yeah, and the diagnostics industry. We do a bunch of different things. We're kind of product agnostic, I'd say, but our niche is single-use, sterile, typically sterile, not always, medical devices or diagnostic devices. But within the medical, it's pretty broad. So we do everything from bioabsorbable implants to textile implants to general surgical instruments and products to orthopedic packaging. So our focus is the end of line. We don't do design. We work with our customers to kind of take that design product and make it a reality from the end of line, getting it built, packaged, sterilized, and commercialized.
Awesome. And those companies are primarily small and startup in nature, or?
Well, it's interesting. I would say half our business is from the large OEMs and half is from what I'd call the mid-market or the smaller market. And we've definitely seen a change as the industry's changed. The larger OEMs are getting more and more of their pipeline for new products through acquisition. So it's funny, we do work for the large OEMs, but we're seeing less and less new activity with them because they're buying our smaller companies. And I have a funny story around that. One large OEM was doing an audit of us, and they had certain really strict rules on what percent of our business could be them, you know? And so we were approaching that percentage, but I had to remind them if they didn't buy 6 of my other customers, we would have been fine. So
Yeah.
the more the market consolidates, that rule kind of flies out the window. But yeah, so we've created a niche for ourselves in kind of the newer product market. And those can come from large or small companies, but I'd say on average we're in the mid market to smaller companies. But half our customers end up getting acquired for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense, and definitely the direction we've seen across all of life sciences, at least in the scope of my career. I can remember when, the Baxters and the Pfizers of the world used to have these huge R&D divisions, and now they
Right.
don't anymore, right? They're just
Yeah.
buying up stuff as they find it. So,
It's impacted our model tremendously because we've had to make sure that we can scale. And so scalability has become a very important piece of our offering because so many companies like us, they can be either very small and unsophisticated or extremely large and not geared to the more dynamic, part of the market, the smaller companies. So we actually added a couple things, one being in-house ethylene oxide sterilization, and we added some capability in Costa Rica so we can really offer the customers a full range of, being able to sterilize, produce, and as they grow, transition to more of a lower cost model for them. So that's worked out well for us.
good. Yeah, my next question was to ask you about your competitive edge advantage, but I think you've already kind of led into that. Definitely some amount of consolidation of the number of suppliers a small company would have to deal with, and sterilization. That's a great addition to your product lineup because that's
Yeah,
always another vendor to manage, right?
it
So
is. And there's, obviously a lot of your listeners will be experiencing the shortage of EO capacity across the country. It's very difficult to get EO capacity right now, especially for our customers that tend to be on the smaller side. So that's why we did that.
that makes a lot of sense, and what a great demonstration of your commitment to your small customers.
Well, you gotta, you said, you asked what our competitive advantage is. And, thinking of that, and I'd love to tell you that we have some system advantages, right? We're able to scale. We've got Costa Rica where we have in-house EO. We do full turnkey package design, sterilization, validation. We are a one-stop shop geared towards smaller to mid-sized companies. So that is a great advantage. But I think in the end, I'm selling peace of mind. I see, this is my first foray into contract manufacturing. I've always been on the OEM side, and it took a little bit of time here to convince the J-Pac employees that you've got to sell from a position of strength, not a position of weakness. And don't lead with price, right? Be confident of the value you're providing the customer, and understand that for these customers, the smaller customers like I used to be, it was a lot of sleepless nights worrying about if suppliers would deliver. So if I had to pay 10 or even 20% more, but they could deliver and give the quality and service, I had no problem paying that. And that took some time culturally to get people away from, we've got to offer discounts to get this customer. Well, actually, you don't. You just have to be good,
Yeah, definitely. So how does J-Pac's med device outsourcing process then improve speed to market for the customer?
Well, so a lot of our customers, so this is the end of line. So you're looking at creating a package that protects the product and keeps it sterile. You've got to validate your sterilization, validate your packaging, validate your manufacturing and assembly, and then start to scale in a controlled fashion. So that part, the post-design part is very problematic, long, painful, and expensive. So what we've done is we've brought resources in so we can control all of it under one roof. So it used to be customers would come to us and we were just the packaging people, right? And the customer then would outsource, okay, sterilization, validation, packaging, validation, residual testing, the whole litany of stuff. We do that all, not perform it all in-house, but we manage all that now. So we've been able to compress a lot of time as customers no longer have to deal with 4 or 5 subcontractors and then get back to us and say, for example, I need some product for sterilization validation. And we say, how much do you need? And they say, we don't really know. We'll get back to you. All that is done now. We understand the process and we control the manufacturing. So whether, we're manufacturing, a certain lot, we understand what's required. We understand, some of the technicalities of what has to happen. So we've been able to cut a lot of lead time out for that. So for example, typical sterilization validation outside, that can be a 4-5 month process. Because of our in-house capability, we can get that done in, 2.5 months, that sort of thing, 3 months at the latest. So we can compress it.
Wow, that's amazing. I was just thinking about past life experience in different organizations and having to play that, project manager telephone game between my sterilization house and my testing house and my and my packager. And wow, that's an amazing problem to solve. And as you said too, like if you can compress those timelines in the startup space, that time is money. It's how much faster can you get on the market and get a good positive revenue stream going.
It's true. And, as much as that's very important with our, the offering, but it really comes down to people too. That model requires a really intensive service structure, right? We really have to have good people that are customer centric, and that's hard to find. And we've got good ones, and we try to, foster those folks so that, because that's the key, right? And in the end, our customers are a little less sophisticated than the larger OEMs. They don't know all the regulatory issues. Mm-hmm. So we've got to guide them through that path and educate them. And that takes a different style if you're going to do it well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, so switching gears to you a little bit, because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs on the show. And, since you're also an entrepreneur, you founded Eggraft Modular Solution. Tell us a little bit about that project.
Well, this is a wild story. I don't know if I have all the time. I'll try to summarize it, but it's pretty interesting. So my career, I started at Hemonetics, and that was, I got there and it was like, a $40 million company. And then 7 years later, it was, $500 million. It grew a lot. And I really got my entrepreneurial bug there. I really got some great exposure and, lessons learned. And I just realized that I really like building. So, several jobs later at Aspect Medical, when we sold it to Covidian, I decided to leave after 7 years and decided I want to do something on my own, but I didn't know what to do. So I had the opportunity to take a year. So I said, all right, I'm taking a year. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do something. And my wife recommended that I hire a career coach. So I go to this career coach, and it ended up being really a life-changing process for me. I won't go through the whole thing because it was months and months of work. But the defining moment in my life was when he asked me, when you go to Barnes & Noble, where do you go? And I said, the architecture section. And he said, why? And I said, I have no clue. So then we spent the next period of time focusing through that. But for, some of your listeners that tend to be more entrepreneurial, it's really finding the intersection of your gift and your passion. And that question about Barnes & Noble was really teasing out the passion area of me, which I really didn't know what it was. And that's how I started Egg Rock, was, leveraging my experience in manufacturing with my interest in architecture. And that's what happened. That's how it started. So I started this company. I wanted to build buildings faster and build them in a factory setting, but not modular housing, more, sophisticated. And I met someone that said, hey, you should talk to the big hotel companies. I know someone at Marriott. So I go down to Marriott in Bethesda, Maryland, and guy, I'll never forget it. I said, well, what's your biggest challenge in building the hotels? He's like, bathrooms. He's like, he goes, we build a 500 room hotel and it takes us 9 months to a year even to open it. We'll open it, but we'll keep the top, 5 floors idle while we're working through all the problems with the construction, And that's what started my wheels turning. I ended up starting a company that made complete, Marriott quality and higher bathrooms in a factory, shipped complete with everything down to the mirrors and tile and everything. They slide them right into the building. And a typical hotel was now being built in 3-4 months faster than they used to. And that just set off a great run. I did, I think, about 8,000 bathrooms all over the country and Canada before we sold the company.
Wow.
So if you can imagine, here's this guy from the med device industry who had an interest in architecture. I start this thing. I raised $6 million, had a facility, 80,000 square foot facility with 80 people, crank out all these hotel, rooms, and we expanded in the military and hospitals and everything. But there's a good lesson there, staying focused, being in a niche, and leveraging what you're good at and what you really enjoy.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. I never really thought about. I was just traveling last week for work. Actually, I wasn't at a Marriott, but a modular bathroom.
It is. The way to think about it is that it's from the outside, it just looks like a bunch of steel, but you open the door and you walk in and it's like, it's done. And so they'll slide it in the building and they just finish off the exterior and integrate it with the floors and stuff. But it had a lot of technical challenges, believe it or not. But we ended up using some technologies, I'll give you one example. So you have to make the floor of this bathroom very thin and very strong. Of course, you can't step up into a bathroom, right? In a hotel room. It has to kind of match the floor. So we went to the aeronautical industry and found certain honeycomb products that were extremely strong and light. We used those as the backer. So we did a lot of things like that. We'd go into this bathroom and no two bathtubs were the same. So we created a system where we laser measure. We'd scan the bathtub and that got routed to a CNC machine. It would cut all the tile and everything all automatically. So we took this room that took 80 labor hours to build. And I think we got it down to 12 hours. It was fascinating, really. I mean, people laugh when I tell them what I did, but behind the scenes, it was all this manufacturing technology I learned in the device industry. So, but in the end, we sold it. I wanted to get back into devices. So that's what I did.
Sure. No, but what great examples of how there's so many common threads amongst industries too, with you talked a little bit at the beginning about lean manufacturing principles and how standardization of processes can really speed things up and make sure you've got good, consistent product, good, consistent quality. I assume obviously you're using some of that sort of technology then in J-Pac as well.
Well, of course. Yeah. Since we work with earlier stage companies, they struggle a bit with design for manufacturing. And although we don't design medical devices, we're fairly skilled at kind of looking at where they are, what they've got, and being able to offer suggestions, for down the road when it's high volume, how to improve that as well as quality. So, yeah, absolutely. All the concepts are the same, it's just that medical life science is a little bit more regulated. There's some, nuances in it, but, in the end, it's producing a good product.
And producing it at scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Design for manufacturability is definitely a challenge, what a huge challenge in the medical device space in general.
It is. We see it all the time. We do a lot in the diagnostics, point of care diagnostic space. We specialize in making packaging blister packs for reagents, wet reagents that go on these microfluidic cards. And it's pretty complex stuff. These microfluidics, it's growing quite rapidly. COVID really helped expand that, but we find that because it's such a young industry, everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel, and we use our experience and say, here's what we're seeing. Here's how you access a reagent on a microfluidic channel. Here's what we're seeing best practice. But still the engineers still want to do it their own way in many cases. and it's a struggle. It really is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So for the listeners out there, boy, listen to the experts. They bring so much experience to the table to help you.
Well, that's what's interesting about a lot of people think contract manufacturing, oh, we're just going to bring this product out to bid and we'll go to different, contract manufacturers. They don't recognize sometimes that I work with 100 customers, right? At any one time. I see 30 orthopedic implants at a time. I see what's going on in the industry. This is a lot of knowledge that younger companies can leverage, right? And if they're willing to listen, and I think that's the bridge,
Yep, that is always a delicate balance for sure. As someone with a lot of years in the quality space can attest to
Yeah,
a
exactly.
lot of those challenges, and they just, So you've got to take all of that experience in and honestly, leverage it. You're really selling yourself short if you don't, and it's just going to take you longer to get there. So.
Oh, that's for sure. Multiple
Well,
times.
oh my gosh, right? Yeah, I've had that exact experience in trying to advise customers on things like, what needs to go into your 510(k) submission, for example.
Yeah.
The agency is going to ask for X, Y, and Z, and they're like, "Oh, well, we're not going to worry about Z." And I'm going, "But really,
No,
you're gonna." And guess what? You.
I
Oh,
hear it every day. It's somewhat mind-boggling, but I understand the pressure for time. It's just, look, it's not our call, but we guide them and try to point out the risk that's associated with that. I certainly would never ship a product I felt, didn't meet the regulatory requirements. But as you know, in the end, the FDA is, they're not telling you exactly what to do. They're telling you what they want, and how you do it. In a lot of cases, it's up to you.
It's up to you. Exactly.
Yeah.
The regulations are deliberately vague.
Yeah,
As I like to say.
they really are. And you get into your own, you're your own worst enemy in many cases, because you over specify to meet a requirement when maybe you didn't have to. You create your own problems. So that's part of it too. Helping educate customers about, well, you're requiring all these tests from us, but you may want to consider they may not all be required. I mean, well, we're trying to meet this reg. Well, that reg is, the spirit of that reg is this, and here are the firm requirements, and you may not have to do all this testing to meet that requirement. So we don't know what to do, but we'll refer them back to folks like you to, we'll say, well, you need to, talk to your quality folks about that, but here's what we're recommending,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, what are some pieces of advice you would give to folks out there who are entrepreneurs getting started themselves?
Well, look, I mean, I'd say you got to know your customer. I think that's a big learning I had. And I mean, know them. So go work with them, ask, to be part of whatever they do, and to be a fly on the wall and get out there and get your hands dirty. If you don't have that, you're gonna miss something. It's not so much about the product. That's what I'm kind of getting at. I mean, it is about the product, but you got to be able to meet a specific need. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss that. They're more into the technology or what could be, but what people are willing. I learned this early, that the hardest thing you'll ever get a customer to do is write a check. And they're not going to write a check unless it really is valuable to them, no matter how great the technology is. So I think that's my first. My second one, which I think is even more important, is whatever you think you need for money, you better get 3 times that. Right.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, people told me to do 2 times, but after going through it for 6 years, I'm convinced it's 3 times. But yeah, and for entrepreneur, I'm focused right now more on the business side, because I think that's what crushes a lot of entrepreneurs, because they're more focused on the technology. But raising money, understanding your customer, making sure your product has a very niche offering, and you can demonstrate value in that niche. Understanding your business model, right? What what is going to impact revenue, cash flow, capital, how much cash you're going to need. These are all things people fall down with. And I guess that gets me back to something I learned is I really believe in what I call a kitchen cabinet when you're starting a company, not so much a board. I think a board of directors brings some challenges and, obviously they have voting rights and, have a real impact on what the company does. But I think in the early stages, it's wise for entrepreneurs to have what I would call a kitchen cabinet, which is they don't vote, but these are people you respect. They're part of your net. They perhaps, maybe you give them something, but a lot of them are just very interested in what you're doing and are willing to offer advice. And they can be a great source of information. So maybe you're starting a molecular diagnostic test, for some disease, and you've got the assay development and you've got what you want to do, but having somebody that's been through that, they may not have the time to sit on a board. When people like myself get invited to boards, it's kind of like you really got to pick and choose. But if someone's like, hey, can we have a coffee once a month? I'm all for that because I'm having coffee anyway. So, what I mean? So to sit with a young entrepreneur and give them advice, and that's very welcome for me. But to be invited to a board and I have to go to quarterly meetings and, that's a different level of commitment. But in the end, I'm giving the same advice, I think. But yeah. So I got a lot of arrows in the back, but I think those are some of the important things.
Good. And my favorite question I love to ask, if you could go back to the start of your career, what would you tell yourself now that you've got all this experience under your belt?
This may seem crazy, but I'd tell myself, and this was crazy, right? For an engineer out of school, just want to do engineering. Go get customer experience as fast as you can. Get some sales experience, no matter what that is. And I'm saying go offer, because no one's going to come to you and say, hey, Mr. Young Engineer, would you like to work in sales? You're going to have to go advocate for yourself for that. And even if it's just going on some sales calls with no real role, or maybe going out as a technical resource for customers, sales engineer, get that experience. I would have told myself. I think the other thing is tell myself in the beginning that your career is a journey, right? I always thought of it as a specific thing. Oh, I'm this engineer. Now I got to be a senior engineer, then a principal. And you get so focused in that. I would have told myself is that take a little bit broader perspective and consider your career like you're carrying a toolbox, throughout these decades and years that you're going to need to put things in that toolbox that you need. And not all of them are going to be your immediate job, So for example, I always knew I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until later in my career, after I matured a bit, that I understood, okay, I need some finance experience. I need some sales experience. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I had a venture capitalist tell me once, he goes, Jeff, just be directionally correct. You don't have to be right on what you want to do, but just be directionally correct. Understand some of the skill sets you're going to need down this path and start to get those in your toolbox. That helps quite a bit. So I guess I'd say go a little broader than deeper sometimes can be valuable. I know in your job, when you're on the younger side, you got to go pretty deep. You got to know what you're doing in your job. And I understand that, but take some opportunities to broaden it out.
Definitely. That's great advice. Well, where can people go to network, follow along, and connect with you?
Yeah, I'm happy to pretty much talk to anybody. You can find me on LinkedIn, no problem. Might take me a bit to get back to you, but I will get back to you. And no worries. Happy to offer any advice and counsel I can, especially for entrepreneurs out there that might be struggling with, getting it off the ground.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.